There's three ways to access the data in a vector. Two ways are what we'll call standard ways, and then the third way is a destructive means of deleting data out of a vector after it's been added. We'll look at that one briefly at the end. But first we want to look at the two standard ways to access data in a vector. Let's begin by including the vector class. Hopefully by now you're well aware that you have to do that every time you want to use a vector. Then let's create a vector of grades. So we'll name it grades. It's integer vector because the grades will be integer values. Let's create two variables, total and grade. Let's write a loop that runs 5 times and puts 5 grades into the grades vector. So I less than equal to 5 plus plus I. Open the body, cout, enter a grade, cin grade, grades.pushback, grade. That finishes off the loop, so we'll close it. One way to compute the total is to access the grades directly. That's the first vector access method, direct access. We would do that by writing total is equal to grades sub 0 plus grades sub 1 plus grades sub 2. Let's drop down to the next line. Plus grades sub 3 plus grades sub 4. Let's write out the total. The total of the grades is total indel. And let's build and run that program just to see how it works. We'll use our standard 100, 90, 80, 70, and 60 to give us a total of 400. As we've discussed before, direct access works fine when you have just a few items to work with. But with the number of grades this small, I probably don't even need a vector anyway. You're probably going to be working with a larger data set. You really need to use a loop to do that. So let's look at that method of accessing the total. Rather than comment out this code, let's just work around it. First thing we're going to do is set the total back to 0, and then let's write the loop to add the grades into the total. So we're going to write for int I equals 0, I less than grades dot size. Remember, the vector starts at 0 and goes through the last position, which is always 1 less than the actual size of the vector, so we want to use less than here rather than less than or equal to. Plus plus I. Here we'll write total is plus equal grades sub I, and then we write out the total. Move down to the next line. Okay, let's build and run that program. Do our same numbers. And we see that both methods work exactly the same. So looping through a vector is the standard way to access grades. Directly accessing the values in the vector is also considered standard, but not suggested if you have very many data items. The whole reason we used a vector was because we wanted to group many items into the vector. We need some sort of simplified method for accessing the items, and that's where the for loop comes in. Now, I mentioned that there was a third way of accessing data that's considered destructive. This method is called popback, and it's kind of the opposite of pushback. Pushback places an item onto a vector. Popback takes it off, and it only takes off one item at a time, and that's the last item in the vector. Let me demonstrate how that works with a different program. So we're going to comment out the code that we've written so far. We're going to create a new vector of string called names. We'll put a few names into the vector. Maybe 2 more. One more name. Now, if we want to remove the last item entered, we call popback, like so. That will remove the last item from the vector. Let's verify how that works by having it go through a couple of these and deleting the last items entered. What we'll do is, let's loop through the vector and display all the names both before and after each popback, just to see how it works. So we'll just do a very simple cout name sub I with a space, and then we'll do a cout indel so that we'll drop it down to the next line each time we go through. So this first for loop will display the names after we've entered them the first time. Then we'll pop back one name. Then we'll display the names again. Then we'll pop back another time, display the names, and do one more pop back. And one more display. So we have 1, 2, 3 popbacks, which will leave us with just one name left on the vector, or one name left in the vector after we're finished. All right, let's build and run the program and see what we get. And you see how that works. So the first time through, we have Raymond, David, Cynthia, Jennifer. We have a popback, and now we have Raymond, David, Cynthia. We call popback again. Now we just have Raymond and David. And then we call popback one more time, and then we just have Raymond. So popback is accessing the data item. It's just that all we're doing with it is removing it, and we can't do anything with it. What I mean by that is you can't write a statement like this. You could not write string name equals names.popback and have that name stored in a variable to do something with it. You'll get an error if you try to compile that line of code. You can use popback to remove items from a vector, kind of like you remove trays in a cafeteria. The last one on is always the first one off. So when we call popback on a vector, the last item added to the vector is the one that's removed when popback is called. Now that we've seen the primary ways of declaring, adding data to vectors, and accessing the values, what I'd like to do next is talk about how you can use vectors as arguments in functions. And we'll do that in the next video.